They walked for what seemed like a very long time and still never came across the Mary Lou. Stanley was pretty sure that they were heading in the right direction. He remembered that when they left the boat, they were headed toward the setting sun. But now they were headed toward the rising sun. He knew the sun didn't rise and set in exactly the east and west, more like southeast and southwest, but he wasn't sure how that made a difference. His throat felt as if it was coated with sandpaper. "You sure you're not thirsty?" he asked. "Not me," said Zero. His voice was dry and raspy. When they finally did take a drink, they agreed to do it at the same time. Zero, who was now carrying the sack, set it down and took out 2 jars, giving one to Stanley. They decided to save the canteen for last, since it couldn't accidentally break. "You know I'm not thirsty," Stanley said as he unscrewed the lid. "I'm just drinking so you will." "Well, I'm just drinking so you will," said Zero. They clinked the jars together, and each, watching each other, poured the water into their stubborn mouths. Zero was the first to spot the Mary Lou, maybe a 1/4 mile ahead, and just a little off to the right. They headed right toward it. It wasn't even noon yet when they reached the boat. They sat against the shady side and rested. "I don't know what happened to my mother," Zero said. "She just left and never came back." Stanley peeled an onion. "She couldn't always take me with her," Zero said. "Sometimes she had to do things by herself." Stanley had the feeling that Zero was explaining things to himself. "She'd tell me to just wait in a certain place for her. When I was real little, I had to wait in small areas, like on a porch step or a doorway. 'Don't leave here until I get back,' she'd say. I never liked it when she left. I had a stuffed animal, a little giraffe, and I hugged it the whole time she was gone. When I got bigger, I was allowed to stay in bigger areas, like stay on this block or don't leave the park. But even then, I still held Jaffe." Stanley guessed that Jaffe was the name of Zero's giraffe. "And then one day, she just didn't come back," Zero said. His voice sounded suddenly hollow. "I waited for her at Laney Park." "Laney Park?" said Stanley. "I've been there." "You know that playground?" asked Zero. "Yeah, I've played on it." "I waited there for more than a month," said Zero. "You know that tunnel you crawl through between the slide and the swinging bridge? That's where I slept." They ate 4 onions apiece and drank about half a jar of water. Stanley stood up and looked around. Everything looked the same in all directions. "When I left camp, I was heading straight toward Big Thumb," he said. "I saw the boat off to the right, so that means we have to turn a little to the left." Zero was lost in thought. "What? Oh, okay," he said. They headed out. It was Stanley's turn to carry the sack. "Some kids had a birthday party," Zero said. "I guess it was about 2 weeks after my mother left. There was a picnic table next to the playground and balloons were tied to it. The kids looked like they were the same age as me. And one girl said hi to me and asked me if I wanted to play. I wanted to, but I didn't. I knew that I didn't belong at the party, even though it wasn't their playground. There was this one mother who kept staring at me like I was some kind of monster. And then later a boy asked me if I wanted a piece of cake, but then that same mother told me to go away, and she told all the kids to stay away from me. So I never got a piece of cake. I ran away so fast that I forgot Jaffe." "Did you ever find him?" For a moment, Zero didn't answer, and then he said, "He wasn't real." Stanley thought again about his own parents, how awful it would be for them to never know if he was dead or alive. He realized that that was how Zero must have felt, not knowing what happened to his own mother. He wondered why Zero never mentioned his father. "Hold on," Zero said, stopping abruptly. "We're going the wrong way." "No, this is right," said Stanley. "No, you were heading toward Big Thumb when you saw the boat off to your right," said Zero. "That means we should have turned right when we left the boat." "Are you sure?" Zero drew a diagram in the dirt. Stanley still wasn't sure. "We need to go this way," Zero said, first drawing a line on the map and then heading out that way himself. Stanley followed, but it didn't feel right to him. But Zero seemed pretty sure. Sometime in the middle of the afternoon, a cloud drifted across the sky and blocked out the sun. It was a welcome relief. And once again, Stanley felt like destiny was on his side. Zero stopped and held out his arm to stop Stanley too. "Listen," Zero whispered. Stanley didn't hear anything. They continued walking very quietly, and Stanley began to make out the faint sounds of Camp Green Lake. They were still too far away to see the camp, but he could hear a blend of indistinct voices. As they got closer, he occasionally could hear Mr. Sir's distinctive bark. They walked slowly and quietly, aware that sounds travel in both directions. They approached a cluster of holes. "Let's wait here until they go back," said Zero. Stanley nodded. He checked to make sure there was nothing living in the hole and then climbed down into it. Zero climbed into the one next to him. Despite having gone the wrong way for a while, it hadn't taken them nearly as long as Stanley had expected. Now, they just had to wait. The sun cut through the cloud, and Stanley felt its rays beating down on him. But soon the more clouds filled the sky, shading Stanley and his hole. He waited until he was certain that the last of the campers had finished for the day, and then he waited a little longer. As quietly as possible, he and Zero climbed up out of their holes and crept toward camp. Stanley held the sack in front of him, cradled in his arms, instead of over his shoulder to keep the jars from clinking against each other. A wave of terror rushed over him when he saw the compound, the tents, the rec room, the warden's cabin under the 2 oak trees. The fear made him dizzy. He took a breath, summoned his courage, and continued walking. "That's the one," he whispered, pointing out the hole where he had found the gold tube. It was still about 50 yards away, but Stanley was pretty sure it was the right hole. There was no need to risk going any closer. They climbed down into adjacent holes and waited for the camp to fall asleep. We're going to stop there for today. We'll see what happens next.